Hey folks, what's going on? I'm Coach Corey, back with Mentally Charged, and today we're talking to the parents. It's a big lesson. We're going to identify some of the things you do really well and some things we need to work on. So buckle up, here we go. I am the personal trainer for your mind.
Steps out, hit
Cut that out. Okay, so to start this lesson, we're going to talk about all of the wonderful things that parents do. You guys are busy. You're rushing kids to the rink and back, to the diamond and back. There's practices, tournaments. It's nonstop. You're cooking. You're your child's bank machine. It never ends, your responsibility, and you want the best for your child. But something happens, around sports. It gets a little touch and go for some reason because we're so emotionally charged. We get so invested in the game and we want our children to do so well that it gets a little sticky. And sometimes we overreact, we make poor decisions, and that's the last thing we want to do because we don't want our child to have a bad reputation. So we're going to go over a few tips that I wrote down today. So one of the big things that I see as a problem with parents in sports in general is this keeping up with the Joneses mentality. Everybody gets whooped up in, what's your kid doing? What camp? How long? Okay, I'm going to send my kid there. And we get this panic frenzied mentality and mindset where we have to put our kids in every single thing that someone else is doing. And it doesn't do the kid any good. It riles everybody up. And it ends up being a negative thing. And that's the last thing you want in that environment. You want it to be a positive thing where kids are learning and growing and developing at a good speed. And we really need to tone it down as parents, be supportive, let our children develop at the rate that they're ready for. And that's the right way to do it. We don't want to force anything. When things go wrong with your kid, parents tend to bust down to the dressing room afterwards, and then there's this whole confrontation. Credentials are questioned. You're in the coach's face. Why did you put this kid down and not my kid? I wanted my kid to be the last one on taking the face-off draw. And there's this butting of heads and this attack, and it doesn't do you any good. It makes you look like a hothead. We're all humans. We all have this caveman brain. And when you lose your cool like that, there's a part of your brain, it's called the emotional part, the amygdala. It's kind of like the bodyguard for your brain, and it steps in and it says, is it time to fight, or is it time to run or freeze? That fight or flight or freeze mechanism, and it's built into every single one of us. And it literally severs the pathway to your thinking part of your brain. Because in battle situations like that, as a cave person or as a primitive human, you don't need to think. It's like stepping off the curb and see a car coming. You want to back up out of the way. You don't need to think at that time. It's time to react. And that's what your amygdala or your emotional brain's doing in this situation. So we want to be aware of that. And that's why there's a 24-hour rule in place. So we really have to be careful as role models in every single situation because all of these children, all these youngsters are watching. And you might not think they're listening, but they're observing all this behavior. They see parents charge in. They're reading your body language. They'll see other players' parents and their body language or what goes on in the stands. If my parent can do it, I can do it. And that really brings down the culture of the game. And that's something we need to change. We need to pump that up and be more classy, more respectful, because it really is all about the children. They've got to have fun. I mean, it sounds cliche, it sounds cheesy, but it really is for the kids. So we also need to understand the coach's perspective and what they're going through. And as a coach, I've taught and coached for over 10 years. The decisions that I used to make were based on three things. Number one, I always went with who was the most consistent. If I had a player that gave me an 8 out of 10 every single time he hit the ice or she hit the ice, I was rolling with that player. Two, I would go with a player that was maybe hot that game, someone that had gotten a goal or two or a lot of good hits or blocked shots or was really positive on the bench. I go with that person. And three, sometimes coaches have hunches. Last minute, there were tons of times where kids on the bench would say, Coach, I got this draw. And maybe not even a centerman, put them on the ice, they win a draw. Parents don't necessarily see that during the game and they get frustrated because my kid's not on the ice the last minute. But we've got to be aware of those three things that coaches are dealing with. A lot of responsibility, greater good. So just kind of, tone it down and think about their perspective before you lose your cool. Okay, so we all want to get on the same page. Coach, player, parent, we all want to do this triangle to support the kid to make sure that they're going to develop and move in the right direction. Coaches, I don't like it when you hand over a 20-page document saying, here are my rules. Parents, let's try to get together and say, hey coach, can we sit down and talk about your rules and your expectations? Let's co-construct this and so we can get on the same page. Everyone is accountable for our actions. Just starts the year off with a bang. Everybody's more positive because everyone's on the same page. So Talk to the coach too about your child and what are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? How does your kid respond to certain feedback? Most coaches are volunteers. They're not educators. They didn't go and get their master's in education, or they don't have their PhDs in sports psychology. They're just helpers. So we want to get on the same page and try to help everybody in that environment. It's key. It's very, very, very important. So the second solution I want to give you today, parents, is respecting the 24-hour rule. Now, we've heard this thing up and down, blue in the face with it, but it is so important, and it's so important because of what I just taught you a minute ago with your amygdala. When you're in that emotional state and you're charged and you want answers, again, boom, that pathway to your thinking part of your brain, it's cut off. You're not thinking clearly. How many times have you been ticked off, done something, and then the next day gone, maybe I shouldn't have, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Ooh, I'm an idiot. Why did I do that? Right? Happens all the time with everybody. We got to be aware of that. Calm down. That's the purpose of the 24-hour rule. It's not cheesy or cliche or anything. It's in there for a reason. A lot of people don't know why, but it's in there for a reason, so that you cool down. And if it's important to you, guaranteed you'll bring it back up the next day or the day after, once you get to chew it with your family. So the third and most important tip of the day is about feedback and doing it in the right way so that we're positive and supportive as role models that we are as parents. Now, I made some notes. The first one we're talking about is a good climate. Now, we want your feedback to be in this optimal zone for development. And all of our children have a wide range of skill sets. So we want the feedback that we give to fit right in that. You don't want to give your kid feedback that's outside of his skill set or below his skill set, because they're not going to internalize that. So we want to be right in the sweet spot, and it's going to take a balance on your point to do that. Same thing with coaches out there. We want to be consistent. No matter what we do, we want to give the same level of feedback every single time. We want it to be stable and trustworthy. All right, stay in the zone and be consistent. Number 3, I want to mention that you need to be specific, okay? Don't generalize. We tend to, as humans and players, generalize. Oh, I had a terrible day. You know, you haven't had a terrible day. You haven't had a terrible game. You made a few errors throughout. So let's not generalize, let's be specific. Talk, okay? Continuously talk. Sometimes kids, youngsters, even adults need breaks, let them cool down. But when we talk, again, we force the bodyguard, remember that amygdala, we force it to calm down. Because the amygdala doesn't know if there's a real threat or not. It's just charged up. But once it calms down a little bit, then you're able to talk, and those good thoughts and reasoning and judgments and all those thinking skills in the thinking part of the brain, or the prefrontal cortex, it kicks in, and then you guys can have a good talk. Well, that's it for this episode. Put a fork in her, she's done. I'm Coach Corey, helping you live the charged life. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. I am the personal trainer for your mind.
Steps out, hit French line,